and welcome back to the Citizen channel. I hope you're all staying safe and well. And we continue our series of City number 9s. Yeah, they're not always guys who've had that number 9 shirt all the time, but they have played at a number 9. Of course, a lot of these number 9s play at different positions as well. But yeah, this guy could have had a little series on his own, could have had a little footnote, if you like. But I'll include him in the City number 9s anyway. We're going to talk Rodney Marsh, of course. I got to see many games Rodney played, and away from home as well, where we weren't very good. We weren't very good in those days, but I went to see a lot of games in the 70s. So I got to see a lot of Rodney Marsh's appearances for City. So we're going to look at him today, so please enjoy. This is part 1 of 3, guys. Yeah, there's a lot to say. Probably could have done 4 or 5 parts, but I'll try and keep it to 3 anyway. So please check out parts 2 and 3 when they're available, or if they're available as well. Yeah, before Jack Grealish, of course, as I'm recording this in June 2022, with his iffy socks. Well, about 50 years ago, yeah, Rodney Marsh liked to wear his socks a little bit low as well. Not quite in the correct way, as most people with the shin pads. And, of course, had very similar qualities and frailties, I think. Perhaps Marsh more so than young Jack Grealish, who's probably picked on. I don't think he's got many frailties. It's just the way he's picked on by certain members of the media and opposing fans. Rodney Marsh attracted bad things from the press, etc., as did Jack Grealish now. And, of course... football's last real showman, Rodney Marsh, at the time. Mid-70s, football was getting a bit dire. Some people were commenting how boring it was getting and a bit horrible. And Rodney Marsh was one of the last real showmen at the time. And I think most City fans, yeah, for the most part, loved him. Obviously, we were severely tested game in, game out, season in, season out. But of course, based on social media now, I think Rodney Marsh reciprocates this sort of love from City fans. There's still certainly a lot of love now, obviously 50 years on. And I think looking at certain things that Rodney Marsh puts out there, he does have a lot of love for City, and we love him as fans for that as well. Especially in the media, where we don't get a lot of love away from apart from our ex-players and fans, of course. There's no doubt at the time, Joe Mercer coming to the end of his days at City, Allison was taking over. No doubt Mercer had his doubts about this, but he relied on his, of course, Allison was instrumental in bringing Rodney Marsh to City at the time, the magician, we could call him at the time. And, of course, it would put bums on seats, which was very important to people, although Peter Swales wasn't in evidence as at the top at this point in time, he soon would be. Money would come into it as well. Bums on seats was definitely a bonus. And of course, Mercer, in his last knockings of being in charge, sort of would respect Malcolm's judgment and go along with it. Like Pep now attracting players, of course, Allison was attracted, or Marsh was attracted to Allison in the same sort of way, coming north, of course, from London, which is a hell of a difference. Of course, the 200,000 paid for him didn't harm matters. That certainly helped with him coming up as well. It was one of amongst the highest ever paid. I think it was 4 transfers at that stage, in and around the £200,000 mark. And like his mentor, Allison, Marsh was ultra confident. He could talk a good game, that's for sure. And mostly he would be able to back that up. Again, comparisons to Jack Grealish. Rodney Marsh was a big fish, of course, in a small pond, probably smaller than Villa for Grealish. But obviously at QPR, a team from the lower echelons, it was doing very, very well. It just won a League Cup as well. So he was a big fish in a small pond. So, as in Grealish, he's coming to perhaps not as big a fish in a quite bigger pond. Don't mess about. Let's not lie about what other teams say. City were a massive team at that time in the 70s. So let's have a look at season 71-72. And, of course, that was where it all, well, probably could say it all started going wrong straight from the start, couldn't it? Because Mr. Marsh was blamed for certain problems this season. The 71-72 season, he joined us for the last 9 games of the season. And City were favourites. City were favourites to win the second title in 5 years at that stage. Not a foregone conclusion. You had both Derby and Leeds breathing down our necks. And it wasn't like now where you've just had one team. Liverpool also would make a late surge for this as well. So you couldn't afford any slip-ups. You couldn't afford. And in those days, slip-ups happened. You know, we didn't have the dominance. You had teams dominated at the home grounds, but away from home, they didn't have the dominance we have now. And there's no doubt in City, Leeds and Derby were the best teams in the league at this stage with 9 games to go. City were 3 points clear, but teams had a game in hand of them. So in theory, it was only 1 point clear. It wasn't a massive gap. And we've managed, if you look at the City, Leeds and Derby, between them, they've managed 17 wins away from home all season out of 47 games. So that just proved how difficult it was. So wins were never guaranteed. As I said, at home, yes, most big teams, the home ground was the Citadel, but away from home, certainly not. He would join, of course, such City legends as Belly and Summerby, and Lee for one. He appeared. If you look at the images and you look back at things that said, if one appeared glad to see him. He was quoted as saying at the time, "To bring the best out of his style of play, I think City's the only club he could go to. I think his signing is an exciting prospect." Of course, not everyone was as enthusiastic. I think the fans generally were okay. I mean, they believed in what Mercer and Allison were doing. City legend Mike Doyle was perhaps a little bit concerned at this stage, making such a signing with only so many games to go. And yeah, I think he had a right to do so. I think if you sit back and look at it on reflection, of course. Despite this, I mean, obviously the great players we had, they were sort of nearing an expiry date at that stage. It was interesting. There was a team ethic in the team. Some young lads had come into the team and been melded into this good team effort. Joe Mercer and Allison had some good young players. Like Tony Towers had been introduced this season, who had fitted in perfectly to the hard-working team. And it looks as though these greats from our 67-68 title-winning season, the guys who were still there, which was certainly 6 or 7 of the players, would have one last momentous act to perform and win a title this season as well. But, as I say, Marsh changed, or certainly changed the dynamic rather than change things. He wasn't fully fit when he came. I believe he was carrying a groin strain. But Allison didn't mess about. He didn't wean him in. He just stuck him straight in against Chelsea on the 18th of March. And Tony Towers, we were mentioned before, had been an ever-present until this game. From the start of the season, he was dropped down to sub, and we'll talk about that as well, the effect it had on other players thinking they'll lose their places as well. I mean, City got the win in this Chelsea game. We won 1-0. In front of the second highest crowd of the season, so at least Allison got his bums on seats, and certain board members got the bums on seats. But it was different to the well-oiled machine. There was a significant difference in the way City played to accommodate Rodney Marsh into the team, and we actually struggled in that game to find our natural momentum. But Allison, as we know, stubborn, clever, intelligent, bright, stubborn. We'll go back to stubborn. Was committed. He was never going to take a step back and alter things, was he? Once he'd launched him in. So yeah, City sat top after that Chelsea game with 8 games left, and we visited St James's Park. A 0-0 draw with Newcastle in 11th. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't a bad result, but sadly, worse was to come. Stoke City visited Main Road. Don't forget, we'd only lost 1 all season at Main Road up to this, and it was April Fool's Day, very appropriate. And they beat us 2-1. And yeah, our only second defeat of the season at home. Allison, though, put the loss down. And yeah, again, he was probably right in saying this, put the loss down to the Stoke keeper, a certain Gordon Banks at the time, who performed heroics. We know how good a goalkeeper he was, even though, again, another one in his twilight years, if you like. And he was probably right with that. But, at the end of the day, we got beat at home. It didn't happen that often. And then align this with a 2-0 loss at the Dell just 3 days later on the 4th of April against the Saints team fighting relegation. Now, that was a shock. I say, if Newcastle draw was okay, the defeat at Southampton, defeat at home to Stoke City. And it just meant, obviously, very quickly, we'd been caught at the top. This advantage we had, we couldn't afford any slip-ups, and we'd already slipped up twice in the space of 3-4 days. Rodney scored his first goal and second goal for City at Main Road in a 3-1 win over West Ham on the 8th of April 1972, Colin Bell getting the other. This settled the nerves just a little bit because it was still in City's own hands. It was still, if City won the games, they won the league. It was as simple as that. Mike Doyle noted at the time, and this is what we talked about before, rather than worry about the teams we had to play, players were thinking and worrying about who was going to be dropped to accommodate Rodney Marsh, because they just thought Rodney Marsh had a guaranteed spot every game, even if he was carrying a little bit of an injury. Despite this, when City beat United at Old Trafford on the 12th of April, again, as I said, win our games, we win the league. Rodney Marsh came on as a substitute and would add a goal to Francis Lee couple as well in a 3-1 win, which was momentous at the time. Great, things we were back on track. The league was in sight. But the player to make way was Mike Doyle, and he mentioned in an interview that Malcolm had told the players before the game that Rodney Marsh, even though he was substitute, would be coming on. He'd actually told them that, and by his body language, Mike Doyle assumed it was him that was going to be taken off, and he was absolutely spot on. It was him who got taken. It worked out, of course. We were drawing 1-1 when Doyle went off, and obviously introducing Rodney Marsh changed all that. So he was right, but obviously it's just a strange way to play, a strange way to inform the players and sort of have the players sort of playing as a team. It just, Allison was sort of jeopardising all that sort of team ethic. Marsh, though, to his credit, was trying to fit in. City were still favourites then after United. 3 games left, so any blame on Marsh personally, I think, was a little bit unfair. It was Allison who'd introduced him, played him straight away. If he'd done it more slowly, City would have reaped the benefits, and we probably would have still won that league, although it would have been difficult. Teams were good, even when you went to Newcastle. There's no guarantee would have beaten with Marsh wasn't there. We're playing at home to Stoke because of Gordon Banks. There's no guarantee we would have won that, if Marsh hadn't been there. So there's a lot of ifs and buts, but Allison has to take responsibility for changing the dynamic of the team. But there you go. All that, despite that, when at Old Trafford, a draw at struggling Coventry again, and they were near the bottom of the table. A defeat at mid-table Ipswich. Mid-table, they weren't up there, but again, totally possible. So when City battered Derby in the last game of the season, it was too little, too late. Derby had already clinched the title as other results went their way. So the flow of the team was obviously disrupted. City had lost just 1 of the previous 9 games preceding Marsh's arrival, but lost 3 of the last 9. And with 2 other strong teams, as I said, waiting in the wings, and also a great run by Liverpool at the end of the season, it were any slip-ups and we'd lose it, and we did. We lost that slight point advantage. And yes, Rodney Marsh was perhaps a catalyst, was involved, but he certainly wasn't the only one at fault. And we'd go on to finish amazingly 4th. So in a table where we were expected to win it, we ended up finishing 4th. Also, during this initial period, Marsh had some. His family was struggling, of course, to settle. London to Manchester in those days. Manchester's a bit more. What's the word now? It's a bit more Londony now, if you like, cosmopolitan, isn't it? But in those days it wasn't, and he was struggling. And every opportunity he got, his wife and family would go back down to London. And he was even considering a transfer request very, very early in his career at that stage. But he knuckled down. It would be the 72-73 season when he began to wear the iconic number 9 shirt and sort of become more accepted both on and off the pitch. His 71-72 stats, 7 appearances, 2 appearances as a substitute, and he scored 4 goals. Season 72-73, Marsh was part of the team that lifted the Charity Shield. I say the disappointment of the last season put behind him. We beat Villa at Villa Park in the pre-season opener. He got his first goal of the season, a 1-0 win over Leicester on the 2nd of September. And with Lee injured, he had a chance for a second, yes, because Lee wasn't around to take the penalties, but he hit the post. So come back soon for Annie on that basis. September the 16th, home game with Spurs, was the first time he actually wore the number 9 shirt, mainly because Wyn Davies had joined our neighbours United, so he took over the number 9 shirt and he scored both City's goals in a 2-1 win. But things hadn't started well for us that season. Previous to the Spurs game, we'd won 2 and lost 6 of the last 8 league games, so they weren't going well. He scored in both legs of our UEFA, a very brief UEFA Cup run against Valencia. It only lasted 1 round. We got knocked out. We drew at home 2-2, and a 2-1 loss in Spain dumped City out. But he did score in both legs. As long as Allison was there, Marsh was always going to play. He was always going to be in the starting 11, no matter what. And he had begun to be accepted by his teammates. He had to adapt, of course he did. Marsh was one of those players, he's not really a big team player, but is that his fault? That's just who he is. So, he started to adapt a little bit better. But, of course, all this would be severely tested when he put in a transfer request shortly after Malcolm Allison left the club on the 30th of March 1973. So, without Allison, probably Marsh was on his way as well. Despite this, Johnny Hart took over and still played him as Marsh continued to give 100% while he was on the pitch. And one goal against Sheffield United in a 3-1 home win on the 14th of April had the fans drooling. Yeah, I mean, here's what some of the papers say. It was called Marsh Magic. Sunday People said Marsh stood with his arms outstretched like a king receiving a homage on his subjects. And why not? For it was a goal that crowned a game so rich in skills, full of charm and beauty, highlighted by superb goals. Daily Express, he mesmerised United defender Ian McKenzie with his ability to pluck the ball out of mid-air and deaden it with one foot. Then he rounded him to place a shot beyond goalkeeper McAllister. The Sunday Express, Marsh, who wants to transfer, scored a goal of such splendour and such inventiveness that it hypnotised the audience for a second. Then they rose as one in salute. The Daily Mail, Marsh, who was the target man for the jeers in the last game of the Malcolm Allison regime, won himself a chorus of adulation by his wonder goal. So, say, even the fans have been getting on his back. And even the manager at the time, Johnny Hart, said, there's no doubt it was a goal of fine individual skills. All the goals were good on Saturday. And Colin Bell's was another good one, which was a result of excellent teamwork and some snappy interchange between Colin and Rodney. Practice. Rod's ability to pull a ball down on his instep is a result of a development of skill in which he can catch a penny on his foot every time or flick his training shoes off his foot over his head and onto a dressing room peg almost every time. Yeah, a bit of an aside there. So the season ended with Marsh on the transfer list. And in the final matchday programme versus Palace on the 28th of April 1973, it was assumed by the club and the fans at that stage that this would be Marsh's last game. The article headline in the programme itself read, Rod's last match, ? Obviously, it featured alongside Mal's last act with a question mark, which obviously he'd gone, and Rod's last match with a question mark. I mean, so we're just read an excerpt from this magazine. Rodney Marsh remains on the transfer list at his own request. He hasn't been drawn into much public discussion about the situation, but has expressed himself fully once or twice on the field lately at Main Road with goals which had the Marsh mark all about them. If you happen to drop into Main Road the other evening when City were playing Newcastle, you might recollect another in a memorable Marsh goal collection, which received a great ovation from the crowd. If anything was going to make me change my mind about staying with City, it would be the reception I've had from the Main Road terraces, says Rod. They've been very good to me, and I like to thank them for that. I hope nobody has picked up the impression that I haven't enjoyed my football since I came to City. I always enjoy playing. I don't think there's been much change of atmosphere during the season. It's obviously better when you're winning, as we have been. When we have had settled side. I enjoy training, I enjoy playing, but at the moment I can't see me changing my mind. So all pointed to him leaving us at that stage. His season stats that season, he played 46, no games as substitute, and scored 19 goals, a great return. He ended up joint top scorer with Francis in the league, but overall, including the cup ties, was City's top scorer. Well, there you go. So join me in part two as, Rodney does a U-turn on his transfer requests to the shock of everyone, at all fairness. And we even get a trip to the Twin Towers, but even that for Rodney would end sadly in controversy. So please join me for that part two. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know your memories, guys, as well. Much appreciated. Till the next time, please stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.